Okay.
Take me away.
Okay. So, like I said, thank you very much for doing this. I want to talk about hip-hop pedagogy and its implementation in urban classrooms and how that can be a benefit. Or maybe you don't see it as a benefit. We don't know. So, can you state your credentials, please?
Yes. So my credentials are the following. I did my high school education at a all-women's Catholic high school in Alhambra, Ramona Common Secondary School. And there I was training your traditional high school A through G curriculum and not much exposure to hip-hop. Then I went on to UC Berkeley and I majored in Chicano studies with an emphasis in educational policy. And then from there I went on to law school. And I did not like my journey in law school, so I left. And I took some time off, and then I went on to Stanford to get a master's in educational policy and evaluation. And then I ended my journey at UCLA with a PhD in social science and comparative education with an emphasis in ethnic studies.
Wow. Okay. Okay. What made you want to go into education?
I always knew that there was something wrong with the educational system. At the young age of maybe whatever the age is when you're in 7th grade, I began to see constantly substitute teachers for math in particular. And I began to think, something's wrong with this. But I really faced the issue of inequality when I got to high school. The majority of the people that went to my elementary school in Boyle Heights ended up going to Sacred Heart of Jesus. And I was given no option. I had to go to Ramona Convent Secondary School because my sister had gone there. Once I got to Ramona, I realized how underprepared I was and how underprepared the nuns, what a disservice the nuns and the school did, because I had a lot of subs. So that's when I realized that there was something going on with the system, because I had to play catch up and I had to go to summer school, and my grades in summer school were contingent on me getting into Ramona Convent.
So how long have you been teaching here at the Mount, or in general?
At the Mount, I've been here, March 2013 is 2 years, and I started teaching at the Mount in 2010 when I started here. And prior to that, I was teaching at UCLA while a doctorate student. And I taught mostly for the McNair Scholars Program. The McNair Scholars Program is a federally funded program that promotes the PhD track for underserviced populations, women, low-income students. So there I taught a lot of courses around skills on how to get into the graduate program. And I also did a lot of counseling and workshops while I was at Stanford for a nonprofit known as College Track, which is an after-school program that assists high school students with their studies. And we now have a couple of college tracks in Oakland. This one was in the EPA in East Palo Alto, but they open now in Oakland, San Francisco. They're bringing one to Boyle Heights. So I also consider counseling a form of teaching.
Okay.
But if you want to go even further back to what some would consider informal teaching, I would say that I've been an educator from a very young age, because I've always enjoyed dialoguing about different types of issues and engaging with my parents on politics and just questioning. And that started at an early age.
So do you think there's a gap between urban youth and course material being taught in classrooms?
Most definitely there is a gap between the curriculum that we have in our schools and the stories, visions, memories of students, in particular students of color, are not included in the pedagogy. And that was definitely my experience with the traditional Catholic high school experience. I was in no way, shape, or form reflected in the curriculum. And there is a dire need to have students feel incorporated in the curriculum. When you feel incorporated in the curriculum, I feel students want to thrive and want to excel because it means something to them. And I know that in particular at my husband's high school, where he is a principal, but prior to that he was a teacher in San Jose at a alternative charter high school there, and then now here in Los Angeles and in San Bernardino. He really made an effort to try to have curriculum that was relevant to the students, and I could see how important that was to those high school students. Now I have the privilege and the honor to be able to teach this curriculum at the college level, but I feel it's critical to start at a very early age. And it's not about indoctrination, but it's about exposing a young child to their historical process, and then that information will allow the child to begin to mold themselves in whatever shape, way, or form they want to. Because often one of the thought processes that are thrown out there, in particular when it comes to the case of Arizona, is that we're indoctrinating youth for revolution. But I feel that there is a way to be able to engage with youth where it doesn't become indoctrination, but where it becomes, as Freda says, critical dialogue.
Can you elaborate on why you think this gap exists? I mean, is it part of the structure, or is it, the teachers conforming? Why does this gap exist, do you think?
The gap between urban youth and curriculum? I feel part of it is that the U.S. educational system hasn't done a good job of stressing the importance of stories, of cuentos, of lived experience. Part of it, I feel, is because we're constantly teaching to the test. Standardized testing, you have to perform at a certain level to get state and federal funding. And so because of that, teachers are sometimes stifled, and their creativity is stifled. Because there's a lot of amazing teachers out there that really want to bring the curriculum, but then they get reprimanded by their administration for taking the time to teach things that are not part of the testing process, for example. So part of it is the structure. And in addition, we also need to make the teaching field more lucrative to individuals, so that different types of individuals will go into teaching. Let's be frank, teaching, we don't get paid a lot. So often students are attracted to the more lucrative positions of a lawyer or a doctor, because a lot of our gente want to help their family. So teaching is one of those professions that oftentimes our family says, ¿para qué? Why are you going to do that? You're going to make no money. But I feel that if we also change some of the financial ties, financial salaries of education, we can make it more lucrative, because teachers spend the most time with students. So I feel if you're going to pay a doctor or a lawyer a six-figure salary, we need to be paying teachers, professors more. So there's more incentive as well for different types of people with different ideologies to go into education. So, and I mean by ideologies, I mean from the right, if you identify that way, to the left, if you identify that way, or everything in the middle.
It's interesting. Okay, so now we're going to get into the hip-hop portion. Do you listen to hip-hop?
Yes, I listen to hip-hop. Yeah. I would say hip-hop is my most, that's what I commonly listen to. I would consider myself a hip-hop head. I came into hip-hop later in my teens, and so I didn't grow up per se with hip-hop, but I listened to a lot of hip-hop.
Okay, so can you, like, as far back as you want to go, or up to now, give me your 3 favorite rappers or MCs.
Oh, you're really pushing me, my goodness. Well, my first experience with hip-hop came, I'll never forget, after my Kairos retreat in private school. Do you know what Kairos is? It's a retreat that seniors go to, and they explore themselves, and then they come back. And I already knew that I was going to UC Berkeley, so I was very excited. And my parents picked me up, and for some reason they decided to gift me with a CD player at that time. This was 1995. And I just started to really explore myself. And the first CD I went and I bought was Ice Cube. And I can't remember the name of the CD, but it was Ice Cube. And Ice Cube is a good lyricist. I don't consider him one of the best. But at the time, 1995, he was coming out with some music that was really making me think. But then I got to UC Berkeley, and that's where I was really exposed to the Wu-Tang. At that time, Tupac was huge, Biggie Smalls was big. So that's when I really started to engage with hip-hop. But my three favorite rappers, you're pushing me. Nas, Immortal Technique.
Yay!
And the third one I would say is a good friend of mine, Tyson. And Tyson Amir Mustafa is a MC who really takes you into the journey of what it means to be Muslim, African American in America. So Nas, Immortal, and Tyson are three of my favorite artists.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, like when you would listen to that, like at Berkeley or at Stanford or UCLA, like what would people around you think?
Well, Berkeley was a fun space because one of my good friends at the time, he actually introduced me to a lot of the hip-hop scene. So it wasn't a big deal. It was the thing to do. And the Bay Area, unlike Southern California, is really big on the underground scene. I mean, They're Too Short revolutionized the hustle of the underground. And there's something to be said about the hustle that happens in the Bay Area that we don't necessarily have in LA. Or at least I'm not tapped into it. So people were just, Tupac was the big thing at the time, but so we were at, what would people say? Well, at Berkeley, it wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, my best friend, who was one of my roommates, she was more into pop, so I would always try to expose her to it. And then the other best friend, who was also my roommate, was into everything. So I was supported. When I got to Stanford, the program that I was in was predominantly white students. So there I didn't talk about hip-hop or really engage with it, except for one person who did his master's on hip-hop and critical pedagogy. And he's now a professor up in the Bay. And so with him, I would talk a lot about Biggie Smalls. But at Stanford, I was sort of silenced in regards to hip-hop because of the space that I was in, but maybe it was my choosing. But when I would go into my dorm, that's when I would engage with it. So I can't really think of what I was hearing, per se, that people were saying. But I know that at Berkeley, I felt very comfortable. At Stanford, I think I made the choice to not engage. And at UCLA, I was older, more in my journey. People knew that I was a hip-hop head. So they knew that I've used it a lot in my curriculum and my pedagogy. So I was very encouraged to do so. My advisor, Dr. Solorzano, has always encouraged me to engage in hip-hop, and I always expose him to who I'm listening to, and we have conversations about it.
That is so awesome. Okay, so do you think using hip-hop pedagogy using hip-hop pedagogy and implementing it into urban classrooms will help bridge the gap? If so, how?
If students want the instrument of hip-hop in all her elements, the emceeing, the graffiti, the breakdancing, all those, if the youth call for it, I say, why not? Because you're going to motivate youth that are going to want to be in that space.
Okay.
Sometimes high school can be very boring. I remember those times. But we can also talk about how you can make hip-hop and her elements A through G standards so that it can be implemented in the curriculum and be used for the college credits. It just takes time and energy and individuals that really want to do that. So I think that, yes, at least in LA, in my experience, in the urban settings, hip-hop would do a great service to a lot of schools. A lot of schools. And it might even begin to increase the graduation rates for Latinos that we know is horrible. It's, graduation rates are so horrible for Latino high school students. Same with African American students. And not all African American Latino students listen to hip hop.
Right.
But I think even if you don't listen to hip hop and you're exposed to it, it can open up your world to different things and different dialogue. And it's about critical dialogue.
Okay, so like you said, taking hip hop and all her elements, like how would you implement it into 8 through G, or even like in higher education? How do you implement that into the classroom?
Well, hip hop, I use the musical part of her a lot in my courses. I wish I could use the graffiti and the b-boying and the b-girling and the whole breakdancing, but in regards to my space here at the Mount, I'm limited, but I could bring in guest speakers. So I use the musical form of hip-hop to help me create dialogue in my courses, because I enjoy it, and I also want to expose students that enjoy hip-hop, expose them to it, but also expose those that are not really vibing with hip-hop, because I think hip-hop gets discounted, the musical element of hip-hop gets discounted because we often think of hip-hop and what's being played mainstream, and so people sometimes have negative connotations. At the high school level, I think you can have more freedom. I think graffiti artwork can be part of the art program. I think that breakdancing can be part of the dance program. I think that studying lyrics, that studying how these MCs write and craft their music, someone like Nas, someone like Mortal Technique, who's so just deep, is a great avenue to be able to begin to think about how to craft an essay. This weekend I was listening to Blackalicious and the Alphabet Song, and me and my husband were having a conversation of how this is a great tool to use with first graders, second graders for the alphabet song, or also he's going to use it with his ELL students to have the ELL students look up some of the words that Blackalicious uses in the alphabet song and then create a story around it. Wow. So creative thought, writing, looking up new words. So hip-hop has so much power and potential. It's just a matter of allowing her in.
Okay, so you mentioned Blackalicious. Who else would you incorporate in your lesson plans?
I incorporate a lot of Immortal in my Chicano Studies courses. In my Human Rights courses, I put in a lot of Immortal. Today I will be using, in my course, we're discussing notions of racial battle fatigue. Racial battle fatigue being the physical manifestations that people of color experience after they have been forced to deal with racism and discrimination on college campuses. And so racial battle fatigue is a theoretical framework. And we're also studying microaggressions, which are small covert actions of racism. And I'm coupling that with Lil Wayne and Bruno Mars' collaboration of the song called Mirrors. I don't know if you've heard that song. Mm-mm. So you'll hear it today in class. Okay. And so that song, what I hope it'll do for my students is to begin to analyze what they're reading. So I use a lot of different people in there. I love Rage Against the Machine because Rage Against the Machine has a lot of political commentary, and I think it's good for other individuals to say some of the things that I want my students to be exposed to. I'm not a promoter of indoctrinating. I don't believe that teaching should be a form of indoctrination, because often educators of color are accused of indoctrinating the people that they interact with, and I'm definitely not a promoter of indoctrination. I'm a promoter of critical dialogue and pedagogy, and I believe that hip-hop is critical dialogue and pedagogy.
So do you have any advice for teachers who are might think about implementing this pedagogy into their classrooms, or not even the ones who are interested in it, or the ones who are scared to? What advice would you give to them?
What advice would I give them? Well, first of all, you make a disclaimer for the music. Let's be frank, there's a lot of curse words. I love Immortal Technique, but he curses a lot and uses the N-word a lot. So some people are not comfortable with the N-word, and so you have to, first of all, provide a disclaimer to the space that you're going to be teaching. And I think that's important to make sure that students understand that this is the kind of language that the MC uses to express him or herself.
Right.
I have more freedom and privilege as a college professor to be able to craft my courses in a way that I see fit. I understand at the high school level it's much more difficult because of the standards that they have to meet. I have standards I have to meet as well, but it's different journey. But the advice I would give to someone that is hesitant about using hip-hop is to read. There's so much now written on hip-hop. Jay-Z has written Decoded. The RZA wrote The Tao of Wu. There's books written on Nas's Illmatic, the first album, 1992, one of the most instrumental albums, I believe, of hip-hop in the 90s. There's a lot written so that you're able to tie some of what you're listening to, the auditory part, to word and scripture, and so that you have support for what you're doing and begin to engage with it and teach yourself about the elements. I also think that a teacher would benefit highly from going to spaces where youth go. Project Flow, where you see some raw talent of emceeing and freestyling, would be a great place for someone that's interested in bringing hip-hop into the classroom to kind of see that. Or other types of nonprofits that engage with youth and spoken word and graffiti. I think going there to see these spaces and then having a frank, honest conversation with the administration and with fellow teachers about the importance of creating and unifying curriculum with youth voice. How can you argue against that?
Right, so you kind of answered my last question, which was, all in all, how would it benefit the youth?
You know, if I was exposed to issues of Chicano history, Latino history, hip-hop music as a high school student, I think that I would have landed on the Berkeley campus with a more mindful understanding of myself. I landed at Berkeley with a mindful understanding of what it means to be a high-achieving scholar, because my high school prepared me to be a high-achieving scholar, and Berkeley was not an issue for me. Where Berkeley was interesting for me was engaging for the first time with other individuals that really accepted being a Chicano. I had no idea what that was, because all these years I was calling myself Hispanic. And I was engaging with more conservative thought process because that was what my family engaged with. So I feel that as a youth, if I would have been exposed to both sides of issues, I think I would have gotten to Berkeley with a wider global perspective. And that's what we're missing in America. A global perspective. Our youth need global understanding of how everything works. We do a great job of teaching students about individualism, but I think global perspectives allow us to think about communion, coming together, that is taught in other countries. You go around the world and everyone knows about American politics and their own politics. Mm-hmm. You go around LA and it's such a fascinating process to see how many people actually engage with American politics. So then that leads to the question, how can we make our political system more attractive to our youth so that they're going to want to engage with it? I argue that hip-hop is a great instrument to be able to have conversations like that.
Well, that was my last question.
Thank you
very, very, very much, Professora. Oh, and just for you, Buns, we're in DH 108.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Thank you.